Have you ever noticed how people come to you when they can't make sense of what they're feeling? Not because you have answers, but because somehow, when they talk to you, things become clearer. You listen in a way that makes them feel like their confusion matters, like their mess is worth sitting with. Or maybe you've noticed this. You remember small things about people that even they've forgotten. The dream they mentioned 3 months ago, the worry they carried in their voice when they talked about their sister, the way their face changed when a certain song came on. These might seem like little things to you, just the way your mind works, the way you move through the world. But here's what you might not see. While you've been focused on what your depth cost you, the overthinking, the exhaustion, the feeling of being too much, you've missed what it's been quietly creating. Your depth is like light passing through a prism. You don't just see what's in front of you. You see the layers, the colors, the meaning that lives beneath the surface. And without realizing it, you've been offering this vision to everyone around you. If you're someone who thinks deeply, who can't help but notice what others overlook, this isn't another conversation about why life feels hard. You already know that part. This is about something simpler. Something you've been doing all along. Something the world has been receiving from you, even when you didn't know you were giving it. So let's begin. Not with what makes you different, but with what your presence quietly adds. The gifts you don't name. So what are these gifts? Let's start by looking at what you've been doing, quietly, without announcement. The first gift. You put words to the wordless. Think about the last time someone came to you upset. Maybe they said they were fine, but you could feel it. The tension in their shoulders, the way they weren't quite looking at you, the heaviness in the space between their words. You didn't push, you just waited. And eventually they said something like, "I don't even know what I'm feeling right now." And here's what you did. You listened to the shape of their confusion, the pauses, the things they almost said but didn't, the emotion beneath the frustration. And then you said something simple, something like, "It sounds like you're not just tired. You're disappointed that things turned out differently than you hoped." Have you noticed what happens in that moment? They stop. They look at you. And something in their face softens, like you just handed them a map to terrain they've been lost in. This is not a small thing. Most people carry feelings they don't have language for. They feel them, but they can't hold them, can't work with them, can't even know what they're dealing with. You give them words. Not fancy words, just true ones. You help them see what they're feeling clearly enough to do something about it. That's translation. That's a gift. The second gift. You hold what matters. Here's something else you do. You remember people in full color, not just black and white. While others remember facts, birthdays, job titles, surface details, you remember something different. You remember the way someone's voice changed when they talked about their father. The small moment of light that came into their eyes when they mentioned a place they loved. The dream they were afraid to say out loud. And here's what's remarkable. You carry these moments not because you're trying to impress anyone, not because you're keeping a mental list. You carry them because your mind assigns weight differently. It notices what has meaning, what has heart, what matters beneath the everyday noise. This is how people know they're not alone, not through grand gestures, through small acts of remembering, through being held in someone else's attention even when they're not in the room. You do this, quietly, constantly, without even thinking it's worth mentioning. But it is. And if what I'm saying feels familiar, if you're recognizing yourself in these words, take a second and like this video. Not for me, but so someone else scrolling late at night, wondering if they're too much, might find their way here too. So why do you have these gifts? What is it about the way your mind moves that creates this ability to translate feeling and hold what matters? Let's look beneath the surface, but gently. Think about what happens when you're sitting quietly. Maybe you're on a bus, or waiting in line, or just staring out a window. Most people in that moment are thinking about their next task, what they need to buy, the email they need to send, the thing they forgot to do. But your mind does something different. It wanders, not aimlessly, but curiously. You notice the woman across from you, the way she's holding her phone like she's bracing for bad news. You wonder about the life she's living, what brought her here, what she's hoping for or running from. You're not trying to do this. Your mind just goes there, into layers, into questions, into the invisible world that lives beneath what everyone else is seeing. Scientists have a name for this part of your brain. They call it the default mode network, but that name doesn't capture what it actually feels like. It feels like your mind has its own weather system, always moving, always connecting things, always looking for the thread that ties one moment to another. For many people, this system quiets down when they're busy or focused. And for some minds, it keeps humming in the background, even in ordinary moments. Even when you're talking to someone, part of you is observing, noticing, reading the room like it's a language only you can speak fluently. This is not overthinking. This is your mind doing what it was built to do. Here's something else that happens in your brain. When you're listening to someone, you're not just hearing their words. You're picking up data that most people filter out automatically. The slight pause before they answered your question. The way their hands tensed when a certain topic came up. The micro expression that flashed across their face for less than a second. Your brain keeps this information. It doesn't discard it as irrelevant the way other nervous systems do. Instead, it stores it, connects it, uses it to build a fuller picture of what's actually happening beneath the conversation. Have you noticed how sometimes you just know something is wrong with someone, even when they say they're fine? That might be part of why. Your mind has gathered 100 tiny signals that don't match their words. And somewhere beneath your conscious awareness, those signals have assembled themselves into a truth. This is not magic. It's pattern recognition. Your brain weaving together threads that others don't even see. There's something else worth naming. You don't just think about things. You feel and think at the same time. Some research suggests that people who reflect deeply may show stronger coupling between the parts of the brain that handle emotion and the parts that handle analysis. In simpler terms, your logic and your heart are in constant conversation. Where someone else might choose between thinking and feeling, your mind does both at once. This is why you can hold complexity that makes other people uncomfortable. Someone tells you they love their partner but also needs space from them. Most people hear that and think, well, which is it? But you understand immediately. You can hold both truths without needing to collapse them into something simpler. You see people not as puzzles to solve, but as ecosystems. Complex, layered, sometimes contradictory, and somehow all of it true at the same time. Now here's the paradox. The same depth that sometimes feels like you're carrying too much is also what gives you the capacity to carry things for others. When someone comes to you drowning in confusion, your mind doesn't shy away from their complexity. You can sit with them in their mess, in their contradictions, in the parts of themselves they don't understand yet. You don't need them to be simple. You don't need them to have it figured out. You can hold space for the fullness of what they're experiencing, because you've learned to hold space for your own depth. This is not something you learned from a book. It's something that emerged from the particular way your brain is wired, from the way you process, the way you notice, the way you weave feeling and thought into something that most people keep separate. And it's something the world is grateful for in a way they don't always name. What you offer in relationships. So we've talked about how your mind works. Now let's talk about what this looks like in the people you love. in the friendships you hold, in the quiet ways you show up that you might not even count as showing up. You notice the shifts. Think about the last time you were with someone you care about. Maybe you were just sitting together, talking about nothing in particular, and then you felt it, a change. Not in what they were saying, but in the space around them. Their smile was still there, but it had gone hollow. Their laugh came a beat too late. The light behind their eyes had dimmed in a way you couldn't name, but could definitely feel. You didn't make a big deal out of it. You just said something simple. "Hey, you okay?" And they said, "Yeah, I'm fine." But you waited, not pushing, not prying, just present. And a few minutes later, or maybe an hour later, they told you the thing they hadn't planned to say, the worry they've been carrying alone, the hurt they thought they could hide. Have you noticed how often this happens with you? How people end up telling you things they didn't mean to tell anyone? It's not because you're demanding it. It's because you create a kind of quiet where truth feels safe enough to emerge. Most people fill silences with noise, with distraction, with the next topic. But you let silence be what it is, a space where deeper things can surface. This is a rare form of attention. And people feel it, even when they can't explain it. They feel met by you in a way that's hard to find elsewhere. You let people be complicated. When the people you love are struggling, when they're contradictory, when they don't make sense even to themselves, you don't need them to be simpler. Someone tells you, "I love them, but I also need space from them." Most people hear that and get uncomfortable. They want it to be one or the other, love or distance, stay or go. But you understand immediately. You can hold both truths without needing to collapse them into something tidier. Or someone says, "I'm excited but also terrified," and you don't try to talk them out of either feeling. You just nod. Because you know that being human means holding opposites, that the truth often lives in the tension between two things, not in choosing one over the other. This is an extraordinary form of love, to be allowed to be messy, to be unresolved, to be in process without someone rushing you toward a conclusion. This is what most people are starving for, and you offer it. Not because you've trained yourself to be patient, but because your mind naturally understands that depth takes time, that complexity deserves space, that people, real people, are never just one thing. So when your friend is falling apart, you don't hand them answers. You sit with them in the not knowing. When someone you love is carrying contradictions, you don't try to solve them. You help them see that all of it can be true. And in a world that demands clarity, that wants everyone to have it figured out, that treats confusion as weakness, this patience, this willingness to let people be as complex as they actually are, this is a gift that cannot be overstated. People don't just feel loved by you, they feel allowed. Room to be human, room to be in progress, room to not have the answers yet. And that kind of space is rarer than you think. Your depth serves something larger. We've talked about what you offer to the people close to you, but there's something else happening, something quieter, harder to see. Your depth does something in the world that goes beyond individual relationships. Let me show you what I mean. If you're still here, still listening, I want you to know there are more conversations like this waiting for you. Hit subscribe, not because I need the number, but because sometimes we need reminders that thinking deeply isn't a burden. It's a way of being fully alive. And you shouldn't have to carry that alone. You slow the room down. Think about what happens when you walk into a conversation that's moving fast. Everyone's talking over each other, opinions flying, reactions piling up before anyone's really listened. The energy is sharp, loud, almost frantic. And then you say something. Not something loud, just a question, or an observation, or a gentle pause disguised as words. "Wait, what did you mean by that?" Or, I'm curious about something you said earlier. And suddenly, the pace changes. People stop. They actually think before they respond. The conversation drops down a level, from surface reaction to something more considered. You didn't demand this. You didn't announce, "Everyone slow down." You just operated at your natural pace, and somehow the room adjusted to meet you. Have you noticed this? How conversations shift when you're present, even when you're not saying much. This is not an accident. Your depth is contagious. In a culture that's addicted to speed, to instant reactions, to hot takes and quick conclusions, you become a kind of anchor. Not because you're trying to be one, but because you simply cannot operate at that velocity without losing something essential. And when you refuse to rush, even quietly, even just by being yourself, you give everyone else a slower rhythm to match. This matters more than it looks, because most people are exhausted by the pace they're keeping. They just don't know how to stop. You show them, without saying a word, that another rhythm is possible. You hold the questions no one wants to sit with. Here's something else you do. While most people are avoiding the big questions, you're sitting with them. Not in a heavy, depressing way, but in a way that's quietly honest. Questions like, what does it mean to live a good life when nothing lasts forever? How do we love people knowing we'll lose them eventually? What are we supposed to do with the knowledge that most of what we worry about won't matter in 5 years? Most people push these questions away. They distract themselves. They stay busy. They fill every silence with noise so they don't have to feel the weight of not knowing. But you can't push them away. Not because you're morbid, not because you're pessimistic, but because you're awake to the deeper currents of being human. And here's why this matters. Someone has to hold these questions. If everyone is running from the things that don't have easy answers, we lose something essential. We lose depth. We lose meaning. We lose the ability to sit with life as it actually is, instead of as we wish it were. You hold these questions not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. You're like someone keeping a fire burning in the middle of a village. Not everyone comes to the fire. Not everyone wants to sit that close to something that asks so much of them. But they know it's there. And on the nights when they can't sleep, when the distractions stop working, when they finally need to sit with what's real, they know where to find warmth. They know where to find someone who won't turn away from the hard questions. That's you. You create space for people to think. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to think more clearly when you're around? How conversations with you tend to go deeper, even when you're mostly listening? This happens because you create a particular kind of space. Not by asking a lot of questions, not by performing wisdom, but simply by being someone who values depth, who isn't afraid of silence, who doesn't need every moment to be filled with easy answers. When people are around you, they feel room to breathe, room to pause, room to think before they speak, room to say, "I don't know yet," without feeling inadequate. Your presence becomes a kind of invitation, an invitation to slow down, to go deeper, to access the parts of themselves that often get drowned out by noise. This is subtle. You're not trying to do this. You're just being who you are. But in a world where most people are moving on autopilot, where thought has been replaced by reaction, where depth is often mistaken for overthinking, you become a rare thing. A space where people can actually think, where they can explore ideas without rushing to conclusions, where complexity is welcomed instead of flattened into sound bites. And that's not just valuable for individuals, that's valuable for all of us. Because the world doesn't just need more information. It needs more people who know how to think, how to reflect, how to sit with nuance. And every time you create space for that, even in one conversation, even with one person, you're doing something that matters. Something quiet. Something the world won't thank you for because it doesn't even know it's happening. But it is happening, and it matters more than it looks. So let's come back to where we started. The gifts you've been giving without knowing. You've probably spent a lot of your life wondering if your depth is too much, if the way you think makes you harder to be with, if the time you need to process makes you slower than you should be, if noticing so much means missing out on the ease everyone else seems to have. Maybe you've watched people move through life quickly, lightly, and you've wondered what that must feel like. To not carry the weight of meaning in everything. To not need so much time in your own head before you can speak. But here's what I hope you can see now. While you were worried about being too much, you were translating emotions that had no words yet. You were holding details that mattered to people, even when they'd forgotten them themselves. You were creating quiet where truth could finally breathe. While you thought you were just observing, you were slowing rooms down. Haunting questions no one else wanted to sit with. Giving people room to think, to pause, to be as complicated as they actually are. These are not small things. These are not things anyone else can do the way you do them. Not because you're better, but because they come from the particular way you're built. From your depth, from the architecture of a mind that sees in layers. Maybe you were never broken at all. Maybe you were never too slow. Maybe you were never too much, just deeply awake. You were doing something the world didn't know how to name, but it was receiving it, quietly, constantly, gratefully. The world moves fast, and a lot of people have to live on the surface sometimes, just to get through the day. But depth still matters. Nuance matters. The slow kind of attention matters. And if you're someone who naturally carries that, without even trying, you're offering something this moment really needs. So if you've ever felt like you don't quite fit, if you've ever apologized for needing time or space or silence, if you've ever wondered if being this way is worth the cost, let this be your answer. You fit exactly where you're needed. Not by becoming smaller, not by speeding up, not by learning to care less or notice less or feel less, but by continuing to offer what only you can offer. Your depth is not a flaw in your design, it's the design itself. And the world is quieter, more thoughtful, more human, because you're in it. Leave a comment below if this landed somewhere real for you. Tell me about a moment when you realized your depth was a gift, not a burden. And if someone you love needs to hear this, someone who apologizes for thinking too much or feeling too deeply, send this to them. Sometimes we can't see our own light until someone else points it out. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being exactly who you are. The world needs it.